Well, if you're wondering about remedies for the heart and how to move from grief to growth, this is a discussion that you do not want to miss. Today we are unpacking loss. Joining us today, our three guests, Marelize, our homeopath, Aisha O'Reilly, our mom of three, as well as our social entrepreneur, and then someone who I respect very much, Lizl Ross, our mental health counselor. There's a lot of topics that are almost taboo and unspoken of. I think grief and loss is one of them. Do you remember the last time you were sad or feeling like you've missed out, specifically loss or grief?
Yes. Me personally, yeah. It's been, probably like a year or so after I had my last baby. Yeah, it just, she's my last baby. So I kind of felt a bit of I don't know if that's even normal, to sort of feel a bit of sense of grief or mourning that this is my last child. This is the last time I'm going to experience this. Yeah. So that definitely affected me.
It's the same sense of grief that a parent has when their child moves from stage to stage. Baby, toddler, teenager. Out of the house. Yeah. So it is a type of grief.
When did you feel lost the last time?
Today, actually. My daughter, who is now 19, is moving into her own place. And she's not been at home, in my home, for a while. But it's a kind of like finality. It's a kind of finality. And that, to me, it's grief. I'm grieving for her. I'm grieving for myself as well. Yeah.
Our family has grieved a lot. Grief has taken us from one city to another. When my aunt died, who was helping me with my kids at the time, it happened so quickly that I just couldn't stand it. I just fled. I fled from home to our other home, and that's what brought me back to Gauteng, work, a job offer, and the fact that she died. I'm almost reluctant to have my kids feel that now. Because grief and loss was such a significant feeling and such a big change for me, I almost don't want to put my kids through it again. And I bought the books about the star in the sky, and we talked about it and how she died. They know what cancer is. They know what the body does. What are we doing when we are trying to withhold emotions from our kids? Because I would hide the world from them if I could.
Would that we could, but we can't. Yes, I agree. There are certain things that should be age appropriate, but overall, withholding an emotion from a child or trying to shield a child too much, in the end, is to the detriment of the child. They then never learn how to deal with their emotions. They have to feel the emotion. I could almost say see the emotion, to learn to deal with it. And it's a disadvantage when you're too protected, when you protect your child too much, and then later in life they do not have the resilience to deal with loss or grief, those types of things.
Do we tell them everything?
No. Once again, age appropriate. I'm not going to tell my 3-year-old in so many words that Granny has died, because she won't understand. What I am going to say is that she's no more there and she's gone to a better place. For an 8-year-old, I would say, yes, death. There was a death. Your granny has died. This is why. So that they can understand on that level. For a teenager, I would say, yes, sorry, your granny has died. This and this and this were the causes, more intellectually. Those types of things. So that it's age appropriate, so that it's not such a big, because grief also is shock. So that the shock isn't as big. You can't dump a year's worth of shock on a 10-year-old and expect them to you can say recover, but didn't expect them to recover quickly, or you never get over it. But to get over it quickly. So it has to be age appropriate.
What about something that happens that will affect their own life immediately. God forbid, mom or dad. Have you been in a situation before where that has happened and you had to counsel?
Yes, with my own children, and I did it very, very badly. So I would advise in a situation like that where you are emotionally not able to cope yourself, that you do look for outside help. I would say in a situation like that, introduce the reality immediately. It's not going to get any better with time. And all you're going to do is drag out the emotions and drag it out, which might just worsen it. That is my opinion. But when it's something as significant as that, if it's a goldfish that's died, I'm not necessarily going to run down the hallway and say, Goldie has died. When it is somebody really close to them, I will talk to them as soon as possible. And then, the biggest thing with grief or surprise or anything in that stage in a child's life is to remind them right there, right at that moment, that it is not their fault. Because that's where a child immediately goes. They're unsure of what's happening. Is it my fault? And I think in any situation like that is to assure, especially the little ones, it's not your fault. It's natural. It happened.
Aisha, take me through your journey of having and then feeling like you're not going to have any more. You've got 3 beautiful children.
I do.
And I'm yet to hold the little one before she starts running around. You feel like you're losing if you're not going to have more babies?
I'm not sure if I'm feeling like I'm losing. I think it's just sort of, it's the end of an era in a way. It's the end of a chapter in my life that even though I was ready to come to, it hits different when it actually happens. My husband and I had already said we're not going to, this is our family. We're complete after the 3rd one. But I don't know, it still feels a little bit so final. I think that's what it is. It's like the finality of it. No more kids. It just feels a bit weird, And so it is something that I think it's also one of those things I haven't really, as with a lot of topics around motherhood, I haven't really come across a lot of these kinds of conversations where women, speak about, this is how I felt when I stopped having children, or this is how I felt when my child, left the home, or this is how I felt when, we're talking earlier about stopping to breastfeed. That's also something that I'm finding myself having to prepare for, especially because she's my last child. So I've breastfed all of my children, and for my youngest, Amaya, so far she is probably going to be the longest one, because I'm like, how do I do this? One last time. So I'm finding myself doing that often, even with packing away baby clothes. I get so emotional.
So I want to tell you that it's probably one of the things I can relate to. Do you know that every month I'm sad, even though we're not planning a baby?
Yeah.
Because in my heart, even though we have 4 kids already, I still want a baby.
Yeah.
And so I must admit, it's the one I haven't come to terms with my grief and loss yet. And my baby's already 6. So today is actually the first time that I'm ever speaking about it, because every month I still think, I wish I had a baby. I wish I had a baby, And I'm the mom that has packed all those baby clothes into boxes, and I only give away some of them because the others I'm going to keep for the baby.
And the teddy bears that all have names.
Yep.
Yeah.
So did you put a plan together in order to grieve? Like, did you say to yourself, after my last baby, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to feel? Because I'm avoiding thinking about it.
I didn't even think it was going to be a thing, to be totally honest with you. I thought, I'm going to be honest, as I always am with my journey in motherhood, I don't enjoy pregnancy. I don't enjoy it.
I love being pregnant.
Do you? Yeah, it's not my thing. You like the pregnancy part. I love or prefer having my baby. So for me, going through pregnancy is very much a means to an end. It's tough on my body. I feel like an imposter. I don't recognize myself a lot, and I don't enjoy that. But then I have the baby, and then, I see the face and then the cuddles and all of the nice things. And so I just kept telling myself, I'm going to be so happy when I'm done making babies. I'm going to be relieved, that. So I was actually really looking forward to it, But then it's a year later after I've had her, and I am still feeling a bit. So no, I didn't prepare because I honestly didn't think that I was going to feel this way. This has surprised me. The clothing part, for sure, because I've gone through it with baby number 1, baby number 2. Whereas now it really is a final thing. And for baby number 1 and baby number 2, I packed the stuff away. We put it in storage knowing that we're going to have another baby to hand the clothes down to. Whereas now it's like there's no one to hand them down to, I guess. So
a good idea with that is because if you do, in my opinion, if you do something like that, if you hold on, you're prolonging your grief. And I don't think prolonging your grief is a good thing. So you need to prepare. You don't want it to happen. You cannot avoid it. So you need to prepare and go, all right, baby is going to go from baby to toddler. Yes, I'd like to hold on to some of those things. That's not bad. But think of a good way to then influence your grief. Give it to somebody that needs it. Yeah. Try to make the transition, if you can say, a joyous transition, so that you have joy with the grief. And that can help to make the grief better.
So all of this talk about babies has made me broody, but what do you say, doctor? Let's talk grief and loss. I come and see my homeopath, and I am going through all these feelings. I'm unsure what is happening to my body, to my mind. I don't want this feeling. I'm so unsure. I'm insecure. I feel like it shouldn't have been me. How could it? We dread wanting to feel it. We don't want our parents to pass on, We don't want this feeling to be carried to our children. What do you say?
Okay, so no one wants grief, but it's part of the human experience. It shows us that we love deeply, that we care about humankind and, of course, our loved ones in particular. And then we need to understand that the process of grief affects us mentally, emotionally, and physically. The physical symptoms could be losing your appetite, not being able to sleep, feeling weak, having headaches and body aches, those real kind of achy body things. And then mentally and emotionally, there is anything from sadness to a sense of loss and numbness and regret, and sometimes even a little bit of relief, which if someone was suffering and now they've moved on. So these emotions and these physical things are so complex that it takes a lot of kind of navigation to move through this and understand where is it coming from and why am I feeling like this. And then from a homeopathic point of view, there are remedies. We've got remedies that are individually for, someone who's got grief because of loss of a loved one or disappointed love or, the shock associated with it and so on. But grief is such a personal and individualized journey that it's really important to, do what you have to. And homeopathy may be your answer, but maybe it's counseling and maybe it's talking to people. It is such a multifaceted emotion that we experience so individually that you need to just ask for help and find the help that will get you through it.
It's so interesting you say that because we all experience different. When's the last time you experienced grief?
When my cat died.
I'm sorry.
I had a cat that was literally, I had him before my children was born. And it's also the first time that my children really saw me crying, with real heart. And I know it was just a cat, but he was my baby and he was with me for many, many years.
But do you see how there is wanting, or explain it to me, Aisha. What would you call your loss or grief?
Sadness, emptiness.
Emptiness,
Yeah, it's like a bit of a hole in a way.
Like a
like
void.
a gap, a
Yeah.
void.
Yeah.
It's a void. Yeah.
We all grieve differently.
Everyone, as you pointed out, is an individual. We don't all grieve the same. There are, however, some steps that is universally recognized and that all of us will feel at stage or during grief. The first one is denial. You don't want this to happen. You don't want why, how, it can't be. Then you get angry. Why? Why has this happened? Why me? Your anger is a lot of, focused on yourself. You can even project that onto the person or the object or for your grief. Then there's a period of bargaining. I would more call it guilt. If I had done this, would this still have happened? Please, if this person can just come back, knowing in the back of your mind that that's not going to happen, but I will give a kidney to somebody that needs it. That type of thing. It's not always rational, but it's got very, very much to do with guilt, because your sadness and your grief often transmutes into guilt very often. Then there is 99.9% you are sure to have a period of depression. Look, we can't all ferry around the whole time. And having a big shock like grief, like a death, something like that, that is just going to drag you down that dark hole. And you are going to feel like life isn't worth living. You are going to feel that you just can't get up. You are going to feel or think, why is it worth it? How is it worth it? Getting through that period is sometimes very difficult. But once again, I'd recommend therapy, just so that you can know that it is a period, it is a step in your grief.
It's not forever.
It's not forever. That person is gone, and then that brings us to the last step, which is acceptance. Sooner or later, and it differs from person to person. Some people never get to the point of acceptance. They get to the point of realization, but not to the point of acceptance. But if you can get, or if people can get to the point of acceptance, that's basically lifting that depression, the guilt, those times. So those are your normal steps, but nobody grieves the same.
The void that Aisha's feeling about having this another baby, and losing a loved one. So those are two different types of, let's call them losses, right? Or voids or emptiness. So what can she do in her scenario? I mean, do we carry these feelings onto our children? I often say to my kids, we even have a joke that we call him Baby Joey. And the kids will say, where's Baby Joey? And we'll say, oh, we left him at the previous holiday destination, because they know that I want this little boy that I don't have. So it's become a standing joke with my kids. But not everyone laughs about, not having. Or so how do we deal with that kind of loss in motherhood? I mean, I remember actually, Ash, the day I got my period after my first baby, I was sobbing. I was crying so much. I was like, you better get yourself to yourself. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So how do we deal with that kind of loss? Like your milk drying up or not having, because I'm not going to be able to have a baby. I'm 43 this year. There is no way there's another baby coming,
I would say in that instance, like, for example, your milk drying up, those types of stuff, to make it just a little bit easier on you, preparation, realization. Know that is going to happen. Try and prepare yourself for it. once it does happen, grieve. Why can you not grieve? It's something that probably, like you say, is never going to happen again. So why bottle all those emotions up? Grieve. And then when you get to the end, which is acceptance, you are then more able to deal with that situation. Then you can realize, okay, there isn't going to be another baby. Actually, we have decided that there's not going to be another baby. So yes, it's a grief, but now I feel empowered because I've realized that there are steps, that I am in certain instances in control, and that it is my decision. I can now feel empowered. Some of them you can't influence, some of them you can. Those that you can't influence, grieve. I can't see why you can't grieve for that. Bottling it up, and why? You just poison your own soul. I would also say support groups. Join a support group for mommies. They're all going through the same thing. We have a saying that in a support group, you don't go to a support group to feel better. You go to a support group to hear how other people's doing worse than you are. And funny enough, I know that's a horrible thing to say, but funny enough, in a way, it makes you feel better because you're no longer isolated. Yeah. It's no longer just your grief. It's a grief that's shared by many. Yeah. And you then, through that, can accept easier and you can empower yourself easier.
I want to talk about gentle support just now, but here's the thing. People grieve differently. I mean, you don't want to give me a chance to cry, okay? You're going to have to leave the room because I will cry. And what is, if you had to break it down, what does grieving look like? So other than support groups and therapy, or to call someone because that's where I can find my counsel line, is it the case of I give myself time? Is there steps to grieving? Do I wake up in the morning and decide I will do nothing? People must know that I'm angry and hurt because I can't have any more, What are the steps of grieving before we get to gentle support that can help us through all of this? Because here's the thing, we're upset. We're still in that first step of, we're not accepting this.
So, Lizl, you were sort of talking about preparing for the grief and also to actually feel the grief. Why we should not bottle it up. And as much as I agree with you on that, for me right now, to be totally honest, I kind of feel like I just don't have the time. I don't have the time to actually sit in my sadness or, really process the emotions because I have my baby to feed. I have my 7-year-old to make sure that he's doing his homework. I have my 3-year-old to make sure that he is going to the toilet. We're potty training him at the moment. So I feel like and that's just my kids, never mind my other roles in my life. So I kind of feel like I'm just so stretched to capacity, and I really need to almost make space in my life to grieve, So do you have any tips for moms like myself in those kinds of situations?
Yes. Realize that you do have to grieve. And then, yes, your life's hectic. It is absolutely hectic, but there's going to be that one moment of self-care that we all have to do each day. And take that one moment of self-care and grieve, even if it's just for a minute, so that eventually, every day, you can come over and you can conquer your grief. You can do that. Alternatively, every morning, just remind yourself. You don't have to go through the whole process. You just have to realize something has happened that you don't want to happen. You're grieving. I'm accepting that I'm grieving, and then go on with your day. So there's different ways of doing it, but you have to make time to acknowledge the fact that you're grieving.
Yeah.
You just did something really beautiful. I never thought of grieving as self-care.
I was thinking the same thing. Because self-care is very much, I'm going to run a bubble bath, I'm going to go shopping.
Sounds
but that's
amazing.
Self-care part.
Yeah. No, grieving Is the moisturizer of the heart.
Oh, I like that. Yes, baby. No, grieving, you cannot grieve if you don't self-care. So grieving is looking after yourself in a way, if you can put it like that. Don't try and hide it and put it in a closet and just go on like life's just the same. Life's not the same. Accept the fact, but give yourself your own time just for you to acknowledge and to grieve. You have to still keep up with baby that's grieving, with husband that's grieving, with the rest of the family. And that impacts your process, impact your child's process. If you haven't grieved, even if you haven't given yourself just 10 minutes, 10 seconds of that realization that care for myself, I am allowed to grieve, then you will not be able to help Baba, to give them the advice from a point of strength, because you won't be at a point of strength. So, yeah.
Girl. We want some gentle support for our moms because they've just been through a tough time. There has been loss, there's been grieving. And we've got the help of our counselor, and we come to you for advice. What are you giving me?
Okay, so sometimes, as moms who are holding the whole ship together, sometimes we have moments where we can actually let go and they sneak up on us because if we keep kind of suppressing it. So if you're driving in your car and a song comes on and it makes you sad, cry it out. Okay. If that ad about the dad and the kid, whatever, makes you cry, let it out. Because very often we don't have, but then acknowledge that the cry that I'm doing now isn't about the song and it isn't about the whatever. It's actually about that emotion that's been sitting on my back for the last 3 weeks. And it's just getting out a little bit at a time. And you'll actually feel lighter.
Yeah, I'm with you with the emotions, letting the emotions out. I must admit that I would recommend some gentle, natural help. Just something to maybe just take the edge off. Look, it's your feelings are so spiked in the beginning. It's almost too much to handle. If you can use something natural just to restore, even if it's a semblance of calm, I would recommend that. I've done that myself. And in the end, it did help me to cope. Just that little bit better.
So we've spoken earlier about homeopathy and being individualized. So for an example like you, Aisha, if that feeling of letting go of having babies, it's almost like a disappointed love or whatever, there's a remedy like Natura, for example, is particularly for giving up something that you've loved so much, like the process of motherhood. Or if you find that you're crying uncontrollably and it's sobbing and sighing and all of that, there's a specific homeopathic remedy for like that. It's called Ignatia. And it just gives you that moment of just being able to deal with it. And once again, you can get it over the counter, you can get it from a pharmacy, or go and see a homeopath or some other natural therapist. Go to someone who can guide you through meditation or do yoga or do whatever it takes to get you, because sometimes also when we physically manifest, for example, do exercise, I found myself in a yoga class bursting into tears because I was doing downward dog. I don't know why, maybe my solar plexus or whatever. And then all of a sudden you go, what is this? What is this release that I needed? So there's lots of very gentle, natural ways, and we can just, we can get the energy to flow and just get things to move again.
You know, as you said that, I'm remembering a moment when I was exercising, and I just had this wave of emotions come to me. It was I have never felt that before, but now that you said that, I'm kind of linking the two. And I think maybe that's also my body's way of sort of like saying, hey, we need to sort this out. We need to figure this out. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Exercise stimulates your dopamine, which is basically normally your happy hormone. But it also, because it stimulates a hormone, specifically dopamine, I think it opens up your feelings just a little bit better. So that, yes, it's your happy hormone, but it's also your realization hormone. And it works on your emotions, it steadies your emotions in a way that, yes, you cry. Because those emotions are acknowledged, they're stimulated, and you feel free to release them. Yeah.
Many times I go for a run, and that's all I do. I cry. I'm the crying runner, and no one will know because I'm wearing glasses or a big cap or just something. And often I'm drying my tears with my snooze or So it does do that, right?
I spoke to a doctor that I once went to, and she said to me she uses running as Prozac. And she knows if I'm this upset or this angry or this sad,
That's how
I
far
have
she
to
is.
run for that far in order to get that treatment that I need.
So, okay, we've got a few remedies now. We've got our homeopath, we've got our counselor, we've got thinking and a bit of exercise. We've got the chocolate and the run. When do we become, and how do we become the listeners? You know, in a previous conversation, Aisha, we were talking about how moms are usually the diffusers of the house. You know, we always need to smell nice and make things nice. And when the tooth falls out, I make pancakes. Yeah. You know, it's always nice when mom's around. Yeah. And they come home for your food. And you're just the party, you know, the homeopath mom, party mom. So we're going through our own grief and feelings, but we also need to be the ear of everyone else's emotions. And so how can we become empathetic listeners when we are going through our own stuff?
Walking a mile in somebody else's shoes. That enables you to put yourself in the scenario or in the feelings of that person that you need to comfort. You are the mommy, you are the nurturer, and you are going to have to offer comfort. Realize and then think to yourself, but what type of comfort for this person? Because this person is walking in those shoes. If I was walking in those shoes, what type of comfort would I want? Yeah. Even if it's just holding your baby, because you know baby is sad, that physical, that intimate contact, that helps. So as the nurturer, as the mom, you know that you need to be strong. Grant yourself time to be strong, but also grant yourself the time to be strong for your children or to be strong for the other people in your life. Because at the end of the day, being able to be strong for them is a satisfaction for you, which then impacts on your feelings and makes you feel, I know it sounds, but it makes you feel better. Yeah. It does.
I was nodding when you were talking about that because I don't know how I knew, but very similarly to Marelize's story about losing, your cats, I've never lost a pet. This is actually my first time having dogs in my life. But my in-laws, so my children's grandparents, lost a dog last year, and that really affected my son. So that was actually my son's first real experience of that kind of the grief that comes from losing a person or being, close to them. And so he was very aware that, Jack was there last weekend and now he's not. So he was really sad about it. And so for me, because, I was sad, but I wasn't, because I wasn't too attached to the dog. But I knew that I had to be there for him. I just didn't know how on a conscious level, but I just held him, because he did kind of, I could see my son is very much a reflection of me. He really feels his emotions. Like, so his little body was so tense and he didn't cry, but I could see and I could feel that he was sad and he was trying to understand and sort of prepare himself actually. Next time I go to Granny and Grandpa's house, he's not going to be there, because he always greeted him when he'd come out of the car and, they'd have like their own little moments. You know how dogs can be, they have their own little. So he was trying to understand how is that going to look like next weekend or the next following weekend when I go to Granny and Grandpa's and Jack is not there. And I didn't know what to say, because it's like, what to say, but I held him. So I hope that was
sometimes
enough.
There is just nothing to say.
Yeah.
Sometimes physical comfort is worth a million words. We know our kids. You can see, basically, when the child is sad. You can see that the child is angry. And that's a part that I wanted to come to. When it comes to grief for a child, encourage them to out their anger. Tell them it's all right to be angry, because angry basically is a part of grief. You're angry. Getting those emotions out, allowing your child to be angry and to release his emotions.
Listen, is there no way, and I'm just asking because I'm trying to be practical. When our hamster died, we have 7 others. So we're okay, you know? But I got so upset now with the loss of the dog. Do we replace it? Do you buy another? Do you go to the SPCA and say, today we're picking up another dog? When the goldfish dies, do we go and fetch another one? When the horse dies, do you replace it with another horse? What do you do?
My opinion, would you immediately replace a loved one that's died? You can't.
But Lizl will do anything for our family.
Yes, I know, but you cannot protect them from everything. You cannot, because it's a part of life. You can try to make it easier by dealing with their emotions, and that's not a bad idea. Yes, the dog has died. We love the dog very much. But there are other dogs at the SPCA that need your love and that can give you comfort in your time of sadness. So in a way, yes, you can replace it, but the child also needs to know you cannot always do that. It's a reality, and it's the emotions will then get coupled to the, okay, I can replace it. I can replace the dog. It's a dog. It's great. But what if you get to Granny has died, and you then go, I've replaced the dog immediately. Why can't I replace Granny immediately? So I would recommend not replacing something like that immediately, an animal or something like that, to realize, to give the child the opportunity to realize that it's not an instant fix. You have to go through your emotions before you can start moving on.
While we're suffering grief and loss, this world is continuing. You know, people are walking past our studio. There's school, there's extramurals. We need to feed kids, and mommy's work. So Aisha and I, we need to go to work. Surely there's something that can help our children to manage, help them to just get through school and extramurals. I don't want them biting their nails. It's not nice to watch. I'm open to all the questions, and as moms, we are creating this beautiful safe space so that we can have these conversations. But is there anything that can help them get through so that we don't have to add another layer of worry?
So I think a part of what you may find is that in many cultures or religions or whatever, there's actually almost rules for grieving. And I think it helps even children to kind of know that it is okay after 24 hours, there will be a burial or a funeral, and we'll stay at home for a week because we can be deep within our grief. But after that, we can go back out into the world, and maybe out of respect for Granny who passed away, we won't go to parties and we won't go out socially, and we won't. So I think by giving kids maybe a little bit of structure within which to grieve, and of course, once again, we don't all move through all the stages at the right time, but I think creating a safe space where they know that it is okay to grieve, but we can also go back into the world because life does go on. We can't stay in this sadness forever.
Can you make me a remedy?
I will definitely make you a remedy.
What's in it?
Love and kindness.
I think to just take that edge off with a natural product, we can apply that for children as well. Because then they don't have to cope with everything at once. They don't have to cope, okay, there's that death. Yes, I need to cope with it, but I've taken just the natural something just to calm the emotions just a little bit. I see nothing wrong with that. Obviously, it needs to be age appropriate. Yeah.
We're getting a lot of valuable advice here, Doctor. I mean, the safe spaces that we create, the fact that we can talk, the fact that grief is self-care, what a beautiful realization. surely one can add another layer to this and go back into the world after our period of grief, whatever that might look like, in order to try and cope and to normalize my own normal. What would you recommend?
So after we've dealt with all the emotions and everything like that, sometimes you could still at that point, for example, apply a homeopathic remedy, because if that loss of someone the loss of someone that you love deeply is still there and it becomes a chronic grief that you carry around with you, something like a remedy like Natura is particularly for chronic long-term grief. People also, if you go and see a homeopath, we are not mental health experts by no means, but a big part of what we do is counseling. Sometimes people don't want to say, I go to a psychologist, but they'll go, I went to my homeopath. Right. And very often the interaction with a homeopath already, it creates a safe space, for example, for mom to come and she can go home with a remedy for herself, or maybe not even for the emotions, but for the sleeplessness that she now has, or any of the other symptoms that you may be experiencing. There's also, with homeopathy, because it acts so deeply on an emotional level, it can work on anger or on guilt or on any of those things. Bach flower remedy that we've mentioned in the other talks before, there's one called Star of Bethlehem, which is specifically for long-term grief. And by taking it for a long, long, long time, months or even years at a time, it unknots all those deep-seated emotions that you maybe haven't coped with or dealt with yet. So there's so much you can do from a over-the-counter point of view with homeopathy, or even magnesium just to help you sleep or something, and then, of course, going to a homeopath as well for a more individualized treatment.
Personally, as a counsellor, and mainly dealing with people's emotions, in a grief situation or a high-stress situation like that, I don't see anything wrong with something natural just to help you to cope a little bit better. Because if you can cope a little bit better, you can deal with those emotions a little bit better.
Since your mother died, you're not the same, you know. Grief has left you in a position where you've lost a little bit of your personality, maybe joy. Do we change after grief and loss? Does something happen to us? And when you return into normal life, you are a little bit different?
You're never the same. And you have to accept the fact that you're never the same. There'll be a little empty space in your life forever. Don't expect to grieve and then just be back to the person that you were. That's not going to happen. You have to realize that that's their familiarity that used to be there. You went and visited your Nana every Saturday. But now, Nana's not there anymore every Saturday. What do you do then? It's an irrevocable change. So no, you're never the same. And you need to realize that you're never going to be the same. What you can do is then maybe turn that time into self-care. Take that time specifically to bond with Baba, play with Baba, physical, intimate time to replace. You can never replace that person, but you can replace a little bit of emotion, getting a little bit of more of emotion in there, which makes it better to accept or easier to accept. Okay, we're not going to Nana every weekend, but I'm going to have a lovely time with Mommy. And we may be going to go do something, or I'm going to build a puzzle with Mommy, those types of things. So yes, you can replace for a child their routine, but no, they will never be the same. You will never be the same. And don't ever expect to be the same.
And it's okay to change, right? For good.
It's difficult to change. It's extremely difficult to change. Nobody likes change. But it's a natural part of life. You have to accept that it's a natural part of life. I would almost say embrace change. It is not easy, especially in a grief situation. There's nothing to embrace in a grief situation. But after acceptance, move more towards, yes, there has been change. I can just as well embrace it. I can just as well accept it and be my person. I'm not the person that I was. Something drastic in my life has changed, but I'm the new person. And that change is what makes the difference.
Homeopathy and counseling, it feels like it works together so beautifully. I mean, just sitting here and speaking about just our grief and a little bit of our loss, I feel can help so many people. In your experience with dealing with any person, client, patient, call us what you need to, but what has been your experience that works well together? I mean, if you could give any bit of advice to anyone who's going through some kind of grief or loss, what would you recommend?
I think in the end, do whatever is going to get you through it, whether that is talking to a friend, joining a support group, going and see a counselor, going and see someone who uses crystal heal. It really, in the end, whether it's homeopathy or something, it really does not matter. It's all about finding what works for you. And that may be a little bit difficult. But listen to those around you who can give you good advice. Take on whatever gets you through the day at first and then through the week. Someone once suggested to me that hole that gets left inside us, we can fill it up by doing things in memory of. So maybe for your hamster that passed away, I know our hamsters all got buried in the back garden with a bit of their favorite food and a fluffy blanket, and it kind of brought closure by putting on the little sign that says, rest in peace, hamster. But maybe for your granny who loved the Kruger, maybe you go to the Kruger as a whole family and you do a special ceremony there. The list goes on. How do we, because we grieve so differently and for different reasons, and some things that we grieve about, someone else goes, but why don't you just get over it? And so find whatever works for you.
That's something we actually don't realize, I think. Acceptance, yes, but closure. You need to, once you've accepted, you don't need to forget, but you need to find closure. Like you said, also, you've got closure, you've accepted, but maybe allow Bubby to hold on to a blanket of there's acceptance, doggy is no more there, but here's his blanket, closure. And I think closure, at the end of the day, it doesn't replace something, doesn't replace someone, but it's that feeling you did something special, it is now done. You've got the memento. But the memento is the reality. That's your closure.
I have a friend that recently lost a son. And someone passing can bring and conjure up a lot of thoughts in our minds. And there's someone that needs your help today. What do you say on the other side of the counseling line?
You show empathy. Through everything that you say, you show empathy. That line that's on TV everywhere, I'm sorry for your loss. Mean that. It might look like just something that you say, but for that person to hear you say, I'm sorry for your loss, means you empathize with that person. You understand that they're grieving. That is basically to empathize, to be genuine, and to say, I'm sorry for your loss. That to you might be a little thing. To that person, it might mean the world. To understand or realize that there's somebody in their corner.
Let's talk about the phases of motherhood. Tell me about where you are at the moment as a mommy.
I am at the 3 kids, 7 and under phase. So I kind of feel like I'm actually in 3 different phases. I'm emerging out of the baby phase with my 1-year-old. She is standing and she is trying really hard to walk, and she's feeding herself, and so there's still a lot of firsts, but there's definitely been some lasts, last year. Then I've got my toddler who is 3 years old, but he is really in that tantrum stage. Hey, it's 0 to 100 in a second. So I think that's the thing. A lot of people sort of assume that my daughter, my 1-year-old, is the one who takes up a lot of our time and our energy. Oh, you're busy, you have a 1-year-old. It's like, no, I'm busy, I have a 3-year-old. My 3-year-old at the moment is much more, he needs a different kind of energy, a different kind of attention. And then I have my 7-year-old who's I'm feeling like, and I don't know, maybe you can also advise me as mothers of older children. Is it normal for a 7-year-old to be so teen-like? and I say that because I hear a lot of parents going on about, oh, wait until they're teenagers. And, everyone sort of like tries to gear you up for the teenage phase. But I didn't feel like anyone geared me up for the 7s. Because right now I'm like, what's happening here? He's got a new sense of independence and he's bathing himself and he's able to make himself cereal in the morning. And he's, so there's a part of me also that's kind of a bit sad that he's no longer this little boy. He's becoming a bigger boy. He's obviously not a teen yet, but he's definitely getting older. And I can see that. And there's this, I'm going to go back to social media and because I'm on it all the time, obviously. But there's this audio that, I think it's 2 guys talking. And one of them asks the other one, what's the best thing about having kids? And the guy says, oh, watching them grow up. And then he asked, the original person asked, what's the worst thing about having kids? And he responds, watching them grow up. So I'm really, like, that audio really, it touches me and it speaks to me because so many times I have that bittersweet moment when I look at my children and they're now interacting with each other. It's not just mommy and me time, it's the siblings, the team, And I look at them and I'm like, wow, I did that. That's amazing. And, I'm so in love with them. And then there are times, just as it happens, I go, oh, but they're growing up. They're never going to be this small again. So that always saddens me. And I know I should be living in the moment. I know that rationally. But when in actuality, it's hard for me as a mom. My husband's very much like, yeah, they're growing up. Great. 1 year closer to them being independent. Whereas for me, I'm like, just a little bit longer. Just a little bit longer.
What does loss look like for you in terms of them leaving small baby behind,
It's no more little clothes and it's no more needing mommy to fall asleep. I think it's again, it's a bit of a weird one that I do want to feel needed. There's some sort of, I hesitate to say this, but it's the truth. There's some sort of validation in that. So there is that sort of like, okay, at the moment they are still in the house, but at some point they're going to go and then they're not going to need me anymore. And what place do I have in their lives if they don't need me? So I think about that, even though they're 1, 3, and 7. I think about that. And that's what makes me feel like, yeah, I need to prepare for that loss. That is going to happen.
You can never really prepare for that loss.
Really?
You can try to accept it, but when it happens, it's difficult. It's that where they say you have to let go, and you want to go, no, I don't want to let go. Just please, just another day. Yeah. But with that, there's the realization that you can't. They're bigger. You're grieving, but you should actually be happy. And it's a potent mix of emotions.
It's so weird you saying that because I'm listening to you speak. Do you know that every time we've had school holidays, sending the kids back to school, I never want to be on social media because everyone's like, oh, they're so happy sending the kids back. And I'm going, I'm not. I want to keep them at home. I'm still the mom that after traveling gets back into the habit of sleeping next to my kids because that's how I don't want them to grow up at the moment. I still call my 6-year-old small baby. And then I can see her transition into a big girl when I say, hey, my big girl. And I'm like, I'm doing her such an injustice calling her a small baby because the truth is she's not a small baby, She's not a tiny baby. But I mean, having 2 teenagers, I sometimes also have to check myself because my eldest is a girl. And I still call her baby, my 19-year-old. Then I've got a 17-year-old who, you know, he's shy. And I remember in lockdown, it was terrible. Many terrible things happened in lockdown. But I think the worst for us was lockdown happened and we couldn't travel to Cape Town, home where the kids are in school and boarding. And by the time lockdown finished, his voice broke. And when we saw him again, he sounded different. It was horrible. It still is, you know, hearing your boy speak like a man, it's just... And the same with my 8-year-old and my 6-year-old, you know, I still have this desire for another baby, you know, but I haven't gotten to the acceptance bit yet, because here's the thing. In grief in family, we have to agree. And my husband and I, we're still disagreeing on that. So I'm ready and he isn't. And he's going, and I'm going, yes. And he's going, no. Loss looks different for all of us. Mm-hmm. What does it look like to you? How old are your kids?
I have 2 girls, aged 11 and 14. And in the past, you know, packing away the last ballet tutu because they, you know, or the ballet tutu that they wore for 7 days a week, 30 days in a row that you had to kind of sneak off them and put it in the wash while they were sleeping. So all of those things up to a point really made me quite sad. But, you know, I'm already 47-ish and I knew that babies were done. I must say at the moment, they are on the verge of becoming real individual people. So for me at the moment, and it's actually more about embracing something new. So they're going kind of from being real kids that you have to kind of keep alive by feeding them, etc. They're now becoming people in their own right. And quite frankly, my kids are probably 2 of my favorite people in the whole world.
That's nice.
Like, you know, we spend lots of time together and we do cool stuff. And then I realized suddenly that in 5 years' time, my eldest is going to be out of school. And I'm already almost grieving for that, because I can't bear the thought that I won't have my kids with me forever. So I don't know, Elana, it's so, we're always saying goodbye to something, but hello to something else. And I think if we can live in the moment and embrace what is to come, of course
I'm suddenly thinking of our grief brag, you know, about the fact that we have got kids to showcase. And there's parents that are watching this that could never have. How do you grieve something that you don't know? You don't know if you can have. You don't know if you will be a parent. You don't know if you'll get to a point to brag about their different stages in life or phases, you know?
You grieve a lost opportunity, because to you it is a lost opportunity and it's something that can never be gained. So that hurt, because it's hurt that comes with that. And it's grief, but it's also hurt. And you grieve the fact of something that's never going to happen. You grieve and you hurt, because that's the main thing. When you hurt, you're sad. When you're sad, you have to grieve. I would say it would basically follow the same steps, but that there's that little tinge of desperation and real sadness that comes with that. So yes, also you can't follow the same steps because the situation is completely different, but you grieve for something that's not there. And that in itself is a completely, I would say, different type of grief and more difficult to deal with. Mm-hmm. But once again, with that type of grief needs to come realization. You can't sweep it under the mat. You can't not talk about it.
So give me the steps of grieving.
So the steps of grieving are denial, anger, bargaining. And for me, bargaining is guilt. If I had done only this. Depression. It's done, it's over, there's nothing I can do about it. And then acceptance. It's done, it's over. I still feel bad, but there's nothing. And then closure, if it ever comes. Everyone's closure looks different. But if you can accept your closure, you've made great gains.
Ladies, insightful, thank you so much for opening your hearts and your minds. We want to remind you that you are not alone. A big thanks once again to Natura Rescue for making this possible and for bringing us all together to have very difficult conversations and to be able to give you advice. Leave some notes in the comments and discuss this further. Maybe show it to your partner and just know that you're loved.